so it's 7 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I'll ask everyone to stand, please, for O Canada. Everyone. And I guess we'll move on to the roll call of councillors. So.
Madam Warden, thank you. District 1, Councillor Sean Sampson.
Present.
Thank you. District 2, Councillor Michael Digdon.
Present.
Thank you. District 3, Councillor Melanie Sampson.
Present.
District 4, Warden Amanda Mombercat.
Present.
Thank you. And District 5, Deputy Warden Brent Sampson.
Present.
Thank you. Roll has been called, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Troy. Are there any items this evening to be added to the agenda for councillors? Okay, so I'm not hearing any. Maybe I don't have any to add either, but I do want to do a shout out of congratulations to the recipients of the Queen's Jubilee, Platinum Jubilee, I believe it was, medals this past weekend. So congratulations to everyone, well deserved. So I'm looking for a motion then to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Sampson. Any further discussion on the agenda? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. And the next is the review of the minutes from the December 19th, 2022 regular council meeting, which seems like last year. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes if there are no errors?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Sean Sampson. Seconder, please.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mike Digdon. Any further discussion on the minutes? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? All right, that motion is carried. So before we jump into our committee reports, we do generally open for a question period in case there are folks in the gallery or online watching who might have some questions about the items on the Committee of the Whole report. And I did have a question earlier about why we do a question period before Committee of the Whole. I'm just going to mention the number to call. So it's 902-226-9885 if you have questions and you're watching. And the reason we do that before Committee of the Whole report is to give people a chance to ask those questions in advance of the report being fully approved. So I know we remember that, but sometimes it's a good refresher as well. So I'll just give it a minute. If there are questions, the number is 226-9885. Okay. I know there's a time lag, but I think probably we're safe, so we'll move on. Thank you, Shelley, for being ready, at the ready for calls should they come in, and we will have another question period at the end of the agenda as well. So we'll move on to committee reports, and I'm going to hand things off to Deputy Warden Brent Sampson, who has a bit of a novel to read for us tonight. So over to you, Deputy Warden.
Committee of the Whole report, January 2023. The committee met on January 9th, 2022. Should say 2023, I guess. The committee discussed Babins Hill Lookoff. I move that council accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole that council defer the estimated costs to carry out the work to expand the Babins Hill Lookoff by 40 meters west along Highway 206 to the 2023-2024 budget deliberations.
Okay, so we have a motion. Could I have a seconder on that, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Digdon. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, that motion's carried.
The committee discussed the purchase of a new fleet vehicle. I move that council accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole that council approve the purchase of a new fleet vehicle at the tendered cost of $72,369 plus HST, with the costs being incurred in the 2023-2024 fiscal year, and further move that the CAO be authorized to negotiate any increase in price resulting from supply of a 2024 model vehicle if no 2023 model vehicles are available at the time of order or delivery.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Could I have a seconder on that motion, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councilor Melanie Sampson. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed? Okay, that motion's carried.
The committee discussed the marketing levy update. I move that council accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole that council refer the Municipality of the County of Richmond marketing levy bylaw number 60 to the Bylaw Policy Committee for review and recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Warden. Could I have a seconder on that motion?
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Councilor Sean Sampson. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion's carried.
The committee discussed CAO Employee Success Plan. I move that council accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole that council refer the CAO Employee Success Plan to the Bylaw Policy Committee.
Okay, thanks, Deputy Warden. Could I have a seconder on that motion?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councilor Digdon. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried.
This concludes the Committee of the Whole report for the month of January 2023, and I move its adoption.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder on the report approval, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councilor Melanie Sampson. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. So we do have another committee report. Next on the agenda is the report from the Bylaw and Policy Committee, so I'll hand that back to you, Deputy Warden.
Bylaw Policy Committee report for the month of December 2022. The committee met on December 12th, 2022. The committee discussed the storm policy. I move that council accept the recommendation of the Bylaw Policy Committee and that council advance the storm policy to a regular council meeting for adoption.
Okay, could I have a seconder on that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Councilor Sean Sampson. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed? All right, that motion is carried.
In response to a request of interest for a public member advertising in the October 2022, the committee received correspondence regarding an application to join. Motion required for approval of a member. I move that council approve Lois Landry as a member of the Bylaw and Policy Committee.
Okay, could I have a seconder on that motion?
I absolutely will.
All right, thank you, Councilor Melanie Sampson. Any further discussion?
I just have one question on the
Sure.
addition to members, and again, Lois is from my district, but I'm just wondering, do you have to be a member of resident of Richmond County?
I'd have to go back and check the terms of reference, but we can
I would
double check
too.
that.
And I don't know that she moved or didn't move, I just know she was going to move, so I just, and again, it was asked to me, so
Sure.
I would guess that that would be, but I will have to confirm.
okay.
Yeah, we'll check the terms.
Yeah.
Okay, any other discussion? All those
Do you
in-
want that part deferred then? Until confirmation, because we probably wouldn't want to
I-
approve it if she's.
Well, we
Would we
weren't
be able to
picking-
make the motion assuming it meets the terms of reference?
Yeah,
Would we be able to word it like that?
You can,
Yeah.
And that way, if there's an
so
issue.
long as she meets the criteria set out in the terms of reference, you can make your motion that way, or
and if it needs to be rescinded, we can do that later.
100% we can.
You know, if she, you know.
Rather than doing it
Yes,
again.
Because, I mean,
Yeah.
anybody could be a public member on any committee and then move and, you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
we'll
and-
have to double check
Yep.
the criteria for
I
that.
didn't mean to throw a monkey wrench in it.
No, no, thank you. It's a good question, something for us to
It is a
check
good
on. And
question.
if that's not in our terms of reference, then it's certainly something we could think about adding in for sure.
For sure.
So, okay,
Yeah.
so any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried.
This concludes the Bylaw Policy Committee report for the month of December 2022, and I move its adoption.
Thank you, Deputy Warden Brent Sampson. Any further discussion on that, or sorry, I need a seconder on that motion.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the Bylaw and Policy Committee report? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried.
Excellent.
All right, thanks very much, Deputy Warden. There's a little bit of work we were into there at our last few meetings, so that's great. The next item on our agenda is a motion to adopt, and it's for the storm policy that the Deputy Warden was just discussing. And the storm policy has been provided in the agenda package, and I'm going to just maybe open for discussion from council if you have any comments on the draft that was presented. This was referred from Bylaw and Policy, and if there's no comments or additional discussion, then I'd just seek a motion to approve it.
I'll move that we adopt the storm policy as a policy of the Municipality of the County of Richmond.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Melanie Sampson, could I have a seconder, please?
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sean Sampson. Is there any further discussion on the storm policy? Okay, so all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, that motion is carried.
Let's go.
All right, so the next item is the second reading and approval. So these were from the Planning Advisory Committee originally, and then of course open for public hearing just prior to our meeting this evening. The first is to approve entering into a development agreement for 4 tourist cabins and cottages on Lot 18, PID 751-44063 on Orion Crescent, Walkerville, Richmond County. So we'd be looking for a motion at this point that council give the second reading to approve entering into the development agreement for the property as described, so. Get a mover on that, please?
Move, I will.
Thank you, Councillor Melanie Sampson. Could I have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Sean Sampson. Any further discussion on that item? Okay, so there being none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. I'm getting a little lost in my words here, sorry about that. The next item for second reading and approval was the proposed land use bylaw amendment to rezone the portions of properties identified as PID 750-86868, 7513-6218, 7505-2530, 7521-9568, and 750-86397 from the residential rural R2 zone to the residential village R1 zone to allow for smaller lot subdivision. So we would need a motion to that effect, please.
I'll move that.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Warden. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second it.
All right, thank you, Councillor Melanie Sampson. Any further discussion on that item? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. Look at us trucking right along here through our agenda. All right. So the next item on the agenda, I believe, is going to take a little bit more time. So this is the new business, and it's related to our governance and boundary review. And if councillors will indulge me, I just wanted to provide a little bit of context just for members of the public who may have been hearing about recent information sessions. Just wanted to give a quick little synopsis on where we are so far. So I guess the first question we've been answering at some of these information sessions lately and have been since the process started back in June, I think, of last year is why are we doing this? And it is that the Municipal Government Act requires municipalities to review council size and district boundaries every 8 years. So the last one was done in 2014, and our time was 2022 to start a new one. So it was not initiated by council. It was a requirement of the provincial government. It is, again, kind of a 1-2 punch. I've been telling people, number one, to figure out the number of councillors that should be representing the municipality, and also to look at the boundaries of the various districts within the municipality. Very specific to that scope. Other questions really are not part of this study, something we can entertain at a later date, though, for sure. Just wanted to give a quick summary of the 5 criteria that the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board will be reviewing when making their decision. So we will submit a report to the UARB. They will make a final decision, and it is that voter parity is within 10% plus or minus of average of all districts. There are communities of interest, recognizing distinct communities, maintaining their integrity, population and area, so where there's high density or large territories, taking that into consideration. Contiguity, so districts should generally be connected, and strong recognizable boundaries. So at this point in time, I know there have been many in-person sessions so far. We've had I think 6 in the last number of weeks alone. There have been 3 surveys put out. The first focused on council size. The second survey focusing on geography did have an error in it, and I think councillors, we discussed that before Christmas and was a big part of the reason that we wanted to get an extension. So we've had our deadline extended from the end of December 2022 to February 15th, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 2023. And with that extension, we did issue another survey, which very recently closed, and I think, wanted to recognize to members of the public who have been asking that I think, we could have probably done a better job on the communications early on around this, and something that we'll absolutely kind of take note of in the future going forward. I know that each of us has had conversations in our communities at this point and with residents about, about what the impacts will potentially be. Communities being split has been a big part of the discussion. I think we need to recognize that that's what happens when we draw, I don't want to say imaginary lines, but we draw lines around communities. There's always going to be some kind of interruption of the natural flow of people. So, but I think that's why it's so important for us to be, have diverse opinions at the table and make decisions in the best interest of the county. Our population has been declining pretty steadily. It has leveled off, I believe, in the last census, but not projected to really increase. Province-wide, the UARB has been taking an approach of reducing council sizes over the last number of years. They do have the final decision, and that's what we need to consider. And so any report or recommendation that we would forward to UARB, I think we need to be really strong in our rationale as to why we're going in a certain direction. And there had been some talk about adding new councillors and what that might cost. And there's no question there would be, in today's world, at the current rates of, stipends and laptops and travel and all of that, there would be an increase should we increase council size, or a decrease should we decrease council size. So that's kind of how that would work. And we do have right now a draft report, I believe, submitted to us by Stantec. There's still markups in it, so it doesn't appear to be finalized, which I know I have some questions on, and we can kind of discuss if we want to ask those questions here or how we want to proceed with that. And I guess at this point, I wanted to, maybe summarize some of the comments that I had heard in the various information sessions, and would ask councillors to jump in, or if you've had conversations in community with individuals, like I've heard comments just, such as every penny of tax rate quickly adds up to $1 and people are really struggling. Voter parity is important, but there are extenuating geographical circumstances with Almadam, with sparse populations in the east and also population density in St. Peter's. There were some comments around keeping areas of water and sewer infrastructure together. There were comments around keeping areas around sort of commercial centers together, like the Village or Arishat, and how Richmond County has seen in the last review dramatic change, for a reduction from 10 to 5 councillors, and voters are still getting used to the new districts, but also to a different governance style, because that's what it has meant, and maybe more time is needed to adjust. So I heard all kinds of those types of comments, and I don't know, councillors, if there's anything you'd like to add in at this point that you may have heard from constituents in your area that might. I'll just open that for comment. I know I was busy taking notes at them, but if not, I can jump to options, but Councillor Sampson, if you...
No, I mean, for me, we've had some public consultations, and I think, first off, I just want to say thank you to the community organizations and the establishments and the halls and legions and and, you know, for helping us organize these events. And I want to thank the people that did attend, you know, have their voices heard and have some open dialogue with us. And I also want to thank all of you around the table for your work ethic and the way we were represent ourselves, and the way that we respect the process here around this table. And the reason I say that is that during one of the open houses in the schools, when residents said that no matter which way we divide these districts, or whichever way you're going to look at it, you're going to have community division. But he said what was nice to see and was concerning in the past is that it doesn't seem like there's any council division around this table. So that was a compliment to us, and is a compliment to you guys, right, and to everybody around this table. When I campaigned, if you guys remember during the debate at Telile, I said that if I had some advice for all of us, it would be to not stop campaigning after the election. And what I meant by that was, not every vote is going to be 5-0 around this table. If it was, then people would be questioning us, right? But we campaign our ideas and our opinions and our thoughts when it comes from one vote to the other. And we vote on it, and then we do it in a respectful manner, and then we move on, right? So that's encouraging. Some people are very encouraged about that. So just wanted to thank everybody. When it came to the open houses for me, a lot of people said that they did fill in the survey. Just punched in 5 or 7, never filled any comments. You know, so once we did our open houses, it went from, I picked 7 because more representation, but then I didn't want any community division. And then I didn't want it to cost us $45,000 per councillor, which is $90,000, which is a cent of tax increase, right? So it was good to hear from everybody, and I want to thank everybody for their engagement, right? So, yeah. I think it's important that we do this on, you know, like I was telling people, we're not going to be able to knock on doors when someone asks us for $250 for recreation. But when it comes to like important topics like this one, I think it's important that we engage the public, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
well said, Councillor. I do think, like, what I'd like to kind of go into next, if, you know, and I'll leave time, of course, for additional comments on what we heard
Yeah.
over the last, you know, I would say not just through the information sessions, but also from talking to our residents and, you know,
Yeah.
discussing this in general in the community. I do want to leave more time for that. But I would like to kind of then move into, these are the options we have ahead of us.
Right.
And then, again, go around the table and seek
Yep.
your recommendations. I know I have a recommendation I'd like to put forward. I'm sure you all do as well. You know, and we can see where they jive is kind of what I'm thinking. So, councillors, do you have any other key comments you wanted to provide, just as we?
No, the only one I would say, and, you know, I apologize as 1/5 of the council for every one of the ones I went to, and that's, you know, none of us, or maybe all of, maybe 4 of you thought of it and I didn't, but one thing I can say is that on the survey, we didn't provide status quo, and that's what I heard at every single, we provided option 5, option 7, but we didn't provide to leave it alone.
Yeah.
And it's just, I felt that was one, or status quo with minor changes. And I felt that was one of the big things that come back to me when we did the houses and the calls and the.
Yeah.
So I again, I made the apology on.
Well, I
1/5
think,
of-
I
and-
think we can give ourselves a little room there, because it is a prescribed process, like I said, that 1, 2, and part of the target is that plus or minus 10%, and our current situation does not meet that target. So I think it's reasonable that we would have gone down a road to look at what voter parity does look like, but I think you're also right, on the other hand, a lesson learned that we need to be right-sizing the process for Richmond County, I guess is what I would say, so, great point.
Yeah, and I guess what I'd say to that, right, is that, you know, the UARB does allow people to go outside of that
Right.
plus or minus 10 with good reason, and I think that, you know, to Councillor Digdon's point, that would have been sort of an appropriate comment piece, right? Like, do you think we should do the status quo even though we're not within that range
Right.
that they're suggesting? And if so, provide your reasoning why. Because I think that's, that could be quite important as we move forward.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Madam Mayor, I just
Yes.
want to remind you, we do have John online
Yeah.
as well. If when you want to get ready to call on him, we can just get him to call in here.
Okay, so thank you, Troy. That's a good reminder. So John Hasseltine from Stantec is available for answering questions. I believe he's listening, and
He is.
yeah, and if we would want him to chime in, or if we would need questions answered, we could ask them. At this point, if there's no additional comments, okay, I will maybe just run through what our options are, just to frame it up. I'm sure we're all well aware, but just to frame things up, really we have, I think, 5 options ahead of us. We can recommend no change to the existing 5 districts. If we do that, we would have an issue with voter parity, which we would have to provide a rationale for. We could recommend the proposed 5 districts as presented, although we do see an issue there with District 2 and 3 and how it kind of veers on to the mainland. Option 3 is we could recommend the proposed 7 districts as presented, although of course, as mentioned, there would be an issue with increased costs. Again, you still have that sort of split communities when especially at the, I guess it would be districts 3 and 4 kind of area. Option 4 is we could recommend, for the 5 districts with slight tweaks to the status quo, to the proposed or to the 7. And then option 5 would be to recommend something completely different, which I think, I don't know that I would recommend that, but those are essentially the options that are ahead of us at this point in the game. So I'm going to ask for some direction from you folks. I would like to know, would you like me to start? Would we like to start in District 1? Would we like to start in District 5? In terms of how you want to do this going forward, would you want me to pick a number out of a hat? Or does somebody want to volunteer to go first? But I really would like to check in. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Deputy Warden, you go right ahead. Yeah.
No, I'd say on, reading through the report over the weekend, and some of it was a lot of information we'd been provided with earlier as well. It gave me a lot of pause to think. Honestly, I prefer the idea of 7, just based on, I think it'd be better representation. I do understand there'd be a cost, however, there could be ways around that, whether the stipends would be reduced if we were to go to 7 as well. That being said, I think it probably is, reasonable that a lot of people shifted their thinking to 5 based on the mapping that was there and not necessarily being as happy with the mapping when the original map of 7 that had an error in it. They may have liked that, but at the end of the day, we can't go with that. That didn't make any sense. I'd be willing to support going with 5, although I think we should try and get within the voter parity where possible. I believe that's where the UARB would like us to go, and it may be easier for us to set this than to end up with a situation like last time, whereas the decision of council was rejected and then sort of forced upon them. But I'm open to other options as well. I think what you mentioned about option 5 of something completely new, at this point, that'd be the only one I'd feel is off the table.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be in favor of that at all. Outside of that, I'm
Okay.
willing to consider a few options.
Awesome. Thank you, Deputy Warden. Seek some volunteers.
Go around
I
the
don't-
table.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
whatever.
It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, okay. Councilor Melanie?
Usually nobody wants to go, so whatever. So I'll just sort of give a little bit of a history, sort of my thought process, and I shared it with the people at the info session that we hosted weekend before last. Originally my thought was 7 as well, and the original 7 maps seemed to look good to me in terms of, keeping communities of interest together. But then when they were changed, and then we thought a little more about the money part of it, and again, to Deputy Warden's point, we could reduce the stipend, we could keep the envelope of money for council the same and divide it over 7 instead of 5. And that can happen. I don't know how popular that would be, but, it definitely could happen. But I've certainly come around to the idea of 5, and the last survey, the third survey, absolutely supports 5, a decision of 5. I mean, the draft doesn't really give us a real recommendation, so I think that's probably important for folks in the public to know, is that typically Stantec would give a recommendation, and although it's in draft form, their recommendation is kind of, we can't find anything that's conclusive here, and so you folks can decide what you think makes sense. What I heard at the information session, what I've heard from people, is that they're happy with 5, and that they've had a really big change when we went from 10 to 5, and although it's been 8 years, it's only been 8 years, right? Is that they're still getting accustomed to what district they belong to. And I said it from the very beginning when we first looked at the map of 5, that I was not, I did not think it was a good idea to separate parts of the main, to separate out Whiteside and Evanston from the rest of that area in particular. So even if that area was grouped together, but outside of the district, maybe I'd feel differently, but they're really left on their own there. And I think, although it does put us out of the 10%, I think if you talk about communities of interest being together, they need to be in that area of interest. So my suggestion, what I would sort of support is I would support the status quo with some tweaks. And in terms of, the District 3 that I represent, one of the tweaks I certainly see, it was supported by every single survey, people saying the same message, which was that Lennox Passage belonged in District 3. And so, of course, I'm a numbers person, so I do recognize that, currently District 2 in its current format is already, at a minus 13.5%, and if I would take the 38 people that are surveyed that are in that area out, they're going to be a minus 16, and if I would add them into the District 3, which is already over, I'm going to be, that District 3 would be over by 13. But I do, again, when we're talking about percentages, that's important, but if we're talking about number of people, it doesn't feel as heavy as the percentage. So, you're literally talking about very few people in the difference that would bring us to that parity. And I think that the harm that it would cause in terms of people identifying with the councillor or the councillor identifying with the area is greater than that difference. So I think there's also been like a little conversation that one of the things that could happen would be, like, again, I'll just talk District 3 because that's my, the area I represent, would be, like St. George's Channel. If that went into District 4, that could bring District 3 into some line. I'm not really supportive of that either. I'm open to any conversation, but again, I feel like if we look at areas of interest, I feel like they really identify themselves with the folks in the Dundee area and West Bay area. Go to the AGM for St. George's Channel Hall. That's the people that I see in that. It's certainly people from the points in West Bay as well, but I do see those folks there. So my thought would be stick with 5. The tweaks I would propose in my own area would be to include Lennox Passage, period. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Melanie Sampson. All right. Councillor
Yep.
Sean Sampson.
Yep,
Over to
so
you.
for me, when you look at the first couple of surveys, there was 106 people that took that survey, and that weighed heavily on proposed 7 councillors. I think it was like 42% to like 21 or 22%. Again, that was only 106 out of 7,582 residents, so it was less than 1% of the population that took that survey, right? And so then we embarked on some open houses and some public consultations, and we had 6 or 7 of those. And I think when you tally all those numbers up, I think it was close to like 80 people or so came
Yeah,
to
I
those
think
sessions.
closer
So,
to 70, but
yeah,
yeah, it was
so
great.
70 to 80. So, so you're looking at 6 surveys, 6 open houses with 70 and months of surveys with 106. So for me, it's good to hear from the public verbally. And what the public said in most of our cases in Jammers Island, in the schools, at the Picage just recently, is status quo with minor tweaks, if we had to make minor tweaks. And Councillor Melanie, you alluded to those minor tweaks, right? That would be, taking Lennox Passage out of District 2, or if it has to stay that way, then it has to. But yeah, for the 38 voters, it's not going to make too much of a difference, right? when you look back in 1997, 1999, you know, you've seen ranges from minus 28 to plus 30 when it came to parity, right? Back in 2008, it was the same thing, right? So that parity is there if you plead your case and you show community division or community involvement and stuff like that, right? So for me, I would go down that road of, and again, the last survey said, you know, after we had the public consultations and the people spoke, the survey went from 7 back to in favor of 5, right? So that would be my recommendation, 5 with minor tweaks if we had to.
Are there any tweaks you want to kind of mention?
Just
Gary?
the tweak that Councillor Mounty said, that's what we've heard.
Adding
you know,
that
if-
back as
yeah,
passage back to
right,
District 3.
Yeah, and again, that's 38 out of his, 38 into hers. Is that number really gonna make a difference when,
Right.
you know, when it comes to the thick of things? I
Right.
don't think it would, right? So I would, yeah, if we're gonna make any tweaks to the current status quo that people are in favor of, then that would be the one, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor.
Yep.
Councillor Mike? take
Yeah,
it.
I usually don't have much to say, so I'll just, so I guess I want to start off by, you know, I appreciate definitely everybody's input. What I will say is that I was never on board for, I guess, a district of 7. And I made no bones to share that with everybody. Nor was I on board for change, and I made no bones to share that with everybody, I guess. So the, you know, although change is inevitable sometimes, I think one thing I will start off by saying is I would support the 5 districts with the slight changes. The slight changes I think I would look at that was discussed around the table that seemed to be missed tonight was the one for Grande-Greve area. So only because I believe it's split right now currently between District 4 and District 5, and that's always been one of the discussions.
The Grande-Greve Road. in
Sorry,
particular
Grande-Greve Road.
Depends on how far down
And
you
ju-
live.
Yeah, and in the report, it makes it kind of reads as if it's on opposite sides of
It's
the road,
not
but it's
like
not the
that.
case. It's just
Yeah.
once you get so far down.
Yeah.
You come into, so there isn't continuity.
Yeah,
Like, you have to travel through District 4 in order to
yeah,
get back into 5
Yeah.
in that case. Not that it's
Yeah.
any long distance, but yeah.
No, but for the residents of there, it used to be
Yeah.
you know, and we, you know, I guess we had the same question, you know, over the talks. One thing I will support was that the people in my district definitely didn't want to see change. They definitely didn't want to see a split. One thing I made clear was that I was never in support of giving up any one of the constituents that I knocked on their door. That being said, when I look at the proposed 7, and I look at the percentages, John seemed to think that with District 5, if that would have been accepted, it was out of parity, it was at 14%, and John felt that there was no problem with having the
To make the
UARB
case.
board making the case.
yeah.
So I look at, so this is where I guess I sit currently is that District 1 is within the plus or minus 10%. District 2 sits right now at a 13.5. District 3 is right on the bubble, like maybe one voter off or 2 voters off, 2 electorals off, I guess. Then District 4 and 5, if you take Grande-Greve from one side to the other, it puts you within the 10% as well. So the only district you still have sitting out is District 2, at, if it remains the same, at 13.5%. So the minor change that I would recommend would just be the one of the Grande-Greve. Currently, the residents of Lennox Passage are already in District 2. I don't know that the UARB board's going to accept making the numbers worse by pushing them further, but that's just the.
Okay. So you're, just so I'm understanding, you're suggesting stick with basically the status quo, except put all of Grande-Greve into District 5.
Yeah, I believe that's where it
Or-
switched, for
that
wherever
what
it
you mean?
fixes,
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Is it 4 that's over?
Yeah,
5 is really close as it is right now. We just have to come up with a new line,
yeah,
basically, if you wanted to have the whole road in it.
yeah,
Yeah. The majority of the road, I think, is in 4.
yes, I think so.
But I think that small tweak makes the,
You were talking about putting the whole
But
community
do you,
into that.
well, yeah, are you suggesting putting it in 4 or 5, I guess?
I'll tell you when I can find that map, right? From Deputy Warden.
Well, because the only way to make that work would be the whole community
whole-
would be in 5, not in 4.
I think so.
That would put 4 and 5 both within 10.
And, yeah,
'Cause
and I
we
get
would
that,
be-
and I think the only issue to have that, with that in 5 is because 5 geographically is over 50% of the county as
Right.
it is.
Exactly.
So if there was ever a case to be
Yeah.
made for one to be smaller, although in reality it was almost dead on to parity, it was within 1 or 2% as it was.
Yeah.
I don't know that, whoever it would be in the future representing it, I don't know that it would be a great idea to continue to add to it. For 2 reasons. One, Grande-Greve is really close to St. Peter's and identifies probably more with St. Peter's. And also, the second part of that is just based on the fact that the current map now, I believe it's 50.9% of the county geographically is in District 5.
Yeah.
So just over half.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. So I think, Councillor Digdon, it sounded like you were suggesting 5 with minor, like to stick with the 5 sort of status quo with these tweaks, but leaving Lennox Passage with District 2?
Well, again,
It's a suggestion.
So,
I'm not asking
so it
you
is
for
a
a
suggestion, so,
decision.
so
Yeah.
I guess my answer would be, yes, to leave Lennox
Yeah.
Passage with just, for 2 reasons. One, because they're already, I guess, represented by District 2.
Okay.
By taking them away is just going to increase District 2's number further and then increase District 3's number further
Okay.
from parity. And then I'm thinking the closer we can get to that 10%, again, I do recognize that the plus or minus, can be up to 25 when we can show, I guess,
Yeah.
reason.
For sure, yeah.
I think it's gotta be pretty, to get even close to 25 though, it's gotta be pretty good reasoning. If, like, even from reading through that report, and I know your reference to some of them being way out years ago, it seems that the URB has tried to tighten that over time and get it in closer. It's not impossible, but
Yeah.
we'd have to have some exceptionally good reasoning.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think the reasoning that I used in my talks was that when you take the distance from District 2 currently and to start adding the Whiteside, Euroville, Grantville, just the separation alone, almost a 4 or 5 kilometer stretch of uninhabited land or uninhabited,
Right.
I guess right there alone just shows that there is no community, I guess,
Yeah.
bond or.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Councillor Digdon. All right, so I guess I'll go, if that's all right. My suggestion is that we would make a tweak to the status quo as well, for a lot of the reasons Councillor Melanie Sampson has talked about, and that it was such a big change in 2014. Those changes, I think, are starting to foster some big picture thinking and maybe a little less sort of in my backyard parochialism kind of thinking, and hoping that we could keep on that track until the population hopefully might warrant additional councillors or representatives in the region. My suggestion is also to return Lennox Passage to District 3. I think you make a good argument there, or rationale there, Councillor Melanie. Although I completely get your point as well, Councillor Digdon, that people, would kind of get used to it perhaps over time. But one of the things that I was looking at, because to the Deputy Warden's point about parity, is that how do we get as close as possible while maintaining these kind of areas of interest and strong boundaries? My thought was, is there a change that we could be doing in Almaden with 2 councillors specifically for Almaden, where we would kind of get a little bit more of an even split between the 2 councillors on the island. So getting sort of a bit
It's just
a closer to, so that's our consultant calling in for folks who are wondering. So,
John.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good. We're just having that discussion, okay?
I'm sorry, actually, I'm gonna phone you on another line because I can see this one's gonna be difficult, okay?
yep. Okay, so closer to like a minus 12% for each. And I don't know that that's possible or reasonable, but I just thought it would at least it would kind of create some even representation on the island for the two councillors. Yes, go ahead.
To your point,
Yeah.
like, again, I didn't really comment about it because again, they're, like District 1 and 2 are not my
Right.
districts, right? And I know that you were at, was there any conversation, you guys had multiple sessions, like, I know that in the surveys, there was discussion about Ayrshire being split. I know I've seen some, kind of correspondence on that, but was there any discussion about that at any of the sessions? Because we talk often about communities being separated from other communities, but this is literally a community being separated, and I'm just wondering if there's been any feedback on that.
So I can honestly tell you, in all the sessions we had, there was really one gentleman that made himself, or made it clear that he would like to see.
All right, yeah, I think that's a little better. Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Great.
Okay.
There
go ahead.
was one gentleman that had, would have liked to have seen Ayrshire just as all of Ayrshire as a community in District 1. Then I think when we showed him the maps and the proposed changes and what could happen, and explained to him that, moving over District 1 also moves over District 2, which creates that separation, and then you potentially have less, I guess you possibly could have less representation at some point on the island. And when he asked for an explanation, I said, and again, to your point back a long time ago, was any counselor can run in any district.
Yeah.
And that is a
Yeah.
fact. To that point, you have a better chance running in a district where you're well-known than you would running in one that you're not even part of the community, the culture, the upbringing, So I think when he looked at the map, he was then more, I guess, open to the fact of having two councillors represent the island, than he was of having Ayrshire broke up.
But I think what we're sort of I think I don't know what your suggestion was in
Yeah.
terms of making the numbers jive a little more evenly. But I just wondered if there was a way that Ayrshire could be
Right.
together
Yep.
in a district.
Yeah.
So I haven't explored the numbers that far.
Yeah.
What I did was I
No.
changed to get you closer, to
Right.
get the two councillors in Almadam closer to the 12, minus 12%.
Right.
Which is still not within parity, but it's like 2% off, it's so close, right? Instead of having 170 people from Ayrshire in District 2, I put 220 people in District 2. And I don't know what that would mean to the line, but I'm sure when you look at Almadam as a whole, there are other ways we could achieve that might
Yes.
Yeah,
make
so
more
instead
sense.
so instead of 170, you said 220, so
220.
that's 50. And the only way to do that is, if you went from the New Horizon Senior Club to Highland Street, and then Beanet's Lane or whatever, which is almost right in line with each other, you probably get, you're looking at Highland Street and you're looking at the foyer in Ayrshire, you're
Right.
probably looking at the 50, 60 voters right there. So my area, instead of New Horizon Senior Club, my area would stop at Beanet's Lane and Highland Street.
Right.
That would be probably the 50 or 60, and I know where you're going, because right now, Councillor Digdon's at 1313, I'm at 1373, so that's 60 voters in the difference.
Exactly.
If
It
you're
puts
looking
you a
at,
little closer.
right, so if you're looking at 2700 in total, if he had 50 extra, that would put me at whatever, and him at close to the exact same number as me,
Yeah.
right? So that would
And again,
Especially if Lennox Passage would be returned to
Right,
District 3.
exactly.
Right.
Then it would be actually exactly the same.
Right.
right.
And those two lanes are almost like, you're going up this lane and you're making a little bit of a left and going up Island Street. It's
Yeah.
almost like parallel with each other, right? So that change could work.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Councillor Sean Sampson. Deputy
So,
Warden.
yeah, two comments. One
Yeah.
was, so in that scenario you were talking about, Lennox Passage was taken into account?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That it would be in District 3, was
Yeah.
it?
right.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is, what, we can ask John this, I guess, to an extent, and Troy, do we have time to sort of
Yeah,
redo those maps
Right.
again? Just
And that's
based
what
on
I-
the fact that
yeah.
we, my understanding was it would be nice to have a decision tonight. It's been 6-7 months that we've been working on this, and I know it's ramped up more recently, but,
Yeah.
I guess I would ask that to John and to Troy. Is
So
that feasible?
I do have that on my list of questions, but I'd just like to finish, if that's okay, because I did have a couple of additional tweaks, and I'm sorry for going on at length, but you guys are asking great questions, so. So, and again, that suggestion for Il Madame, recognizing that I'm not a counselor here, and I
Yeah.
would definitely defer to your connections and expertise here. My suggestion also was, because when we take Lennox Passage out of District 3, it does throw that district out of parity. My suggestion was to look at moving the St. George's Channel over to District 4, but I do completely take your points, Councillor Melanie, and I would be supportive of either or, and I know, when I think about it on a personal level, I would absolutely jump at the chance to represent that community, but I also understand it's not about my personal love for the breakfasts at St. George's Channel Hall.
We can both still go.
We can both still go, which we did last time.
Yes.
So, it's a bigger issue than that, so I'm not opposed to either one, but I did recognize that moving St. George's Channel from District 3 to District 4 would return your district to parity at about 9% over the average. But then, of course, it puts District 4 over the average, and then, my feeling is that that's okay, because the rationale there is that there is in that district a population density within the St. Peter's area that, you can service a lot of people in a much shorter amount of time, to the deputy warden's point, where it's not covering 50% of the geography of the county. So my feeling is that District 5 should be a little bit less, because of that incredible distance that a councillor there has to travel compared to the other areas. So my feeling is we would fix the issue with the few voters on Grande-Greve Road to put them in District 4. Originally, that was my thinking, but if we left St. George's Channel in District 3, which I think presents there's a really good argument for that, then I guess I would suggest putting all of Grande-Greve into District 4 from District 5. It would put that district at about 14% over parity, but it would give District 5 about a minus 1.4%, and again, to the Deputy Warden's point that it's such an incredibly large territory to cover. So at this, the suggestion I'm making then at this point would be basically, 4 of the 5 districts are slightly out of parity, but no one is completely out of whack. We're still within numbers, within a couple hundred voters of each other per district, so. Okay, so that's my suggestion. Deputy Warden, you look like you had a question.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I get all your reasoning on that, and it makes perfect sense. I kind of said from the beginning, and we have to sort of exclude ourselves from these
Exactly.
conversations to an extent, because I said,
Yeah.
in all honesty, I liked
Yeah.
the idea of 7 originally, but I also like the district as it is, and I think we probably all feel that to an extent about liking the districts as they are. But, it's to think of somebody in the future
right.
covering that
Exactly.
geographic area, it can be a deterrent
Yeah.
for people. So, and that's, even though it's a small addition, that's where I'd be fine with that, not adding to it,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Warden. So, where that leaves us, I think, is with the question, my feeling at this point is that, we would maybe hear from John, so thank you, John, for joining us this evening. I think what we're hearing around the table is pretty much consensus around not going with one of the existing sort of scenarios that really are almost 100% focused on voter parity. We would like to explore the status quo with those tweaks that were discussed. And I guess my question to you at this point is that, given our deadline, would there be time for us to provide you with this information so that you could create a new map with the tweaks that we're discussing here once we come to a final decision on it? How much time would that take? And over to you for a comment on that.
Okay, I actually just put in the chat there that I'm trying to follow the conversation, but I couldn't really follow the details, so I'm not too sure exactly
Sure.
what the tweaks are that you're talking about. But making up a new map is not particularly difficult. It'll largely depend on, so I have a GIS analyst I'm work with. I'll have to see about her availability, but the actual making of the map in the framework that we've got, which is pretty well established, probably should only, it shouldn't take more than a day. So maybe we could prepare a new map tomorrow, but that's going to depend on exactly what she has on her plate.
Great.
I haven't obviously brought this up with her at all.
Okay, thank you, John. That's great. Okay, so I think that sort of answers the question you had around timing, because that was definitely a concern for me as well. My suggestion, I think, at this point would be, this evening, if we could probably get a motion on the number of districts, that it's the status quo with the following tweaks to the map, then authorize me and perhaps Troy to work with John to bring a final copy of the mapping back to council. We would probably need to have a special council meeting, maybe that first week of February, and make sure that we develop our strong rationale. And I just want to recognize, that there's a member of the public here who was good enough to come and attend one of the sessions, and that was your comment. So we need to make sure that we have a strong rationale for what we put forward. So will councillors generally be okay with that process?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what kind of where have we sort of landed? I think we've
Right.
all, it certainly sounds from around the table that we've landed on 5 with tweaks. I think
Yeah.
the discussion is more about what do the tweaks look like.
Yeah.
I think we need to come to a decision. Yeah,
And maybe is that one of the questions that we should have for John before we make those tweaks?
pardon?
Does he feel that if we do hover around the 11 and 12% for 4 out of 5
But
districts?
we're gonna need to provide a strong rationale in terms of why we're doing that.
Right, so we need to provide it to John needs to provide it to the UARB.
Well,
I guess
the
in
word
my
just
question,
suggested we would do that when we would have our special meeting.
yeah, my question, I guess, to John prior to all that would be, does he feel that that's something that we can push through? He does,
Well, I think we're asking for an opinion. You know what I mean?
They have been approved with
Yeah.
variances that are whatever larger. It's about whether or not we can provide strong enough rationale to support it.
Yeah.
I mean, the report that John sent to us that we read for the meeting today clearly showed that, in the years when the plus or minus was 33%, people were pushing the limits. When it was 25%, they were at or over the limits, but they were still approved because they had strong rationale. So I think that, officially the limit is the plus or minus 25. The UARB is really saying, what they really want is 10%. So yes, we're going a bit over those recommended, we're between the 10 and 25, but with strong rationale. And I think anybody who would look at a map and see the way we were trying to do a 5 district to be within parity, that, our rationale to keep the communities together is strong. I think the fact that we did have such a huge change 8 years ago, I think will hold some weight. But I think to the warden's point, it's really, we can ask John's opinion, of course, but it is his opinion.
And as you mentioned, Councillor Melanie, I mean, keeping the communities together is a strong argument, and I'm sure that that's going to be looked into and considered strongly. But like you said, it's not like we're all at minus 24 or plus 24.
Right.
Or
That's right.
25.
And in the
We're
past,
at
that was
11.
the strong argument,
Right, yes,
right? It
exactly.
specifically said,
Right.
at that time, the argument was to
Right.
keep the communities together, to blah, blah, blah. All of the arguments that we're talking about making are all the ones that in the past, when
Were accepted.
councils have put forth recommendations that have been outside of the ranges, were found to be acceptable by the UARB, right? And I
Yeah.
recognize that,
Yeah.
of course, boards, like everything else, change from year to year,
Yeah.
and this board may determine that they really want to stay within that. And if they do, we have to recognize that when we're presenting something
Right.
that's not sort of what they've said they'd like to see, that they could come back with something different. But we need to do what we think is right for
Yeah.
our county and for
Yeah.
the residents of the county, and
Exactly.
I think that's what we're talking about doing.
No,
So-
for sure, yeah. And what makes me feel comfortable and gives me confidence is that, again, like I said, it's not like we're all at minus 24,
Right.
minus 25.
Yeah.
And we gotta sell this.
Yeah.
We're all at maybe minus 11, minus 12, or,
Yeah.
you know, so
Very
we're,
close.
we're very close and we're pushing
Yeah,
that agenda, right? So
Yeah.
I think we should be okay,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
and the 2% variance is like how
Right.
many people, like it's,
Right,
you know what I mean? Every percent variance is not very many people,
right.
so it's not a lot of a difference.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the tweaks then that I have noted from all of the conversations is that we would go with the 5-district scenario with the status quo, but specifically the changes we would be doing would be adding Lennox Passage back to District 2, that we would look, sorry, District 3, wrong, District 3, I can't count, that we would create more equitable division on Almadam between the councillors if possible, that, you know, works for the communities, that we would move Grande-Greve to District 4, and that we would, I also would like to throw in, maybe fix the issue with the 2 voters in, I think, the Thibaultville area and move them to connect to the River Bourgeois area. That would, I think, repair a lot of the issues that we had been hearing about with the last election, so. And leave St. George's Channel in District 3, because I think Councillor Melanie Sampson, you make a great point there. It was originally in the math just worked so beautifully.
I know, I know.
But you can get sucked in by the math sometimes.
Yes.
It's about people, not numbers, so, yeah. So would folks be generally supportive of those tweaks? So I'm seeing a yes from the Deputy Warden, Councillor Melanie,
Absolutely.
okay. Councillor Digdon or Sampson,
Yeah, we're good, yeah.
yeah?
He's drawing me a map of every shack.
Okay, I see that, that's great.
Yeah.
Got it, real-time planning. I still think we should get Stan Tech to do
I was campaigning my idea. I was like, yeah.
Can
That is-
I mean,
Okay.
can I make a little bit of just a
Absolutely.
little suggestion? So when we're talking about Ayrshire in particular, right, and we're talking about 50 and where that, you know, again, like you guys have done a little bit of like, I call it like
Drive-by.
sleuthing or whatever, you know, trying to figure out where that could look like. But if before we come to the special meeting, I think it would be a good idea for everybody to see that map, and then
Absolutely.
if you especially, the 2 of you see something that's glaringly a concern, that we
Flag it in advance.
Right, flag it in advance
Yeah.
so that we could ask John to tweak that a bit, just so that we may, you know, we're not making a decision by
Yeah.
email or anything, but just to have another option so that when we come together, that we're not saying, oh no, I don't like the way that's divided, now we can't vote today because we're not happy with that division, right? So I think we want to try to be, we want to highlight any flags before we get to that special meeting that we may see.
Yeah,
Does that sound like
I would echo that
Yeah.
sentiment,
Yeah.
just because we don't want to end up coming for a special meeting and end up walking away saying, okay, we're just going to make one more adjustment. or
Yeah,
whatever.
Exactly.
we need another
Yeah,
special
these
meeting.
Yeah.
suggestions
Yeah,
are
and it's not
far
something
better.
that John can do on the fly, right?
Yeah.
Like as he
Exactly.
said, he has to go to a specialist, they have the specific where everybody lives to make the map, so it's work, right? We want
Yeah.
to make sure it's done properly.
And our deadline looms.
And our
Exactly.
deadline looms. But I'm excited about this, and I have to say, there were some, you know, there was a comment that in the old days, maybe it would have been like, okay, we're just gonna put it out there, and then it's gonna be, you know, 4 against 1 or 2 against 3, or whatever the case may be, and I really like this process where we're trying to kind of have a discussion and be a little more collaborative about it, so I think that's a sign of the modernization of councils in general, and I'm really, really pleased with how this is going. It's, you know,
Yep.
we're not all coming out with what we thought, but
No.
that's what, you know,
That's what it's
this
all about.
negotiation is,
Yep,
right?
I
So-
totally agree, Madam Morton. I mean, like the
Yeah.
resident in question said, you're not talking only about community parity, you're talking about council parity here,
Yeah.
right? So it's good to see, and I think
Yeah.
it's a great process, right? So
Yeah.
it's good.
Okay, so at this point then, I'm gonna ask for a motion to have the warden and CAO work with Stantec on a new map that would include the following changes. It would be to add Lennox Passage District 3, explore a more equitable division on Almadam between the councillors, to move Grande-Greve to District 4, and to fix the issue, to move the voters in Thibaultville to return them to District 4 as well.
Yeah, so I guess just to add to that, so that John does know where the line would potentially, the next,
Well, I'm thinking we'll work a little collaboratively with you folks on that to make sure that the map that's created is
On my little map.
Yeah.
specific, since you seem to have the civic
I'll
address.
scan it if you
What's
got it
happening right
ready.
now?
Well,
Google
the-
Maps on the go.
the next line that literally moves over is Highland Street.
Yeah.
And then Minette's Lane, just kind
Yeah,
of,
so we'll kind of explore that
Yeah.
and, yeah, make it specific. I don't want to put it too specific in the motion
Yeah,
because
no.
I want to leave a little bit room to make sure that it makes sense for, like I said, not just the numbers, but the people, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
okay.
Excellent.
So that's the motion I'd be looking for at this point.
I'll make that motion.
Councillor Sean Sampson has made the motion. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Melanie Sampson. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Oh, Deputy Warden, did you
Nope.
have something? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. All right, so thank you very much, John. We'll be in touch and I'll be able to give you some specifics, I think, between Troy and I. We'll arrange to have a chat maybe later in the week. And
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll be available.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look forward to.
Great.
talking to you.
thank you so much.
Thanks, John.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye then.
bye. Okay. Oh, wait, there's more to do.
There's more to do, yes,
Thank you,
ma'am.
councillors. That was a great discussion. The next item on the agenda is notice of motion regarding the amendment to the private ways bylaw, which is bylaw 66, in order to add section 5, repeal and replace. So this is just a notice of motion. We don't need the motion right now, but just, I don't know, maybe I'll ask Troy to give you a quick little blurb on why this is appearing on the agenda at this point in the game.
Yep. This is one that was kind of started midstream with us, and there was one little section that's missing, and that is that when you amend it, you need to repeal and replace all the previous versions. So that little blurb was missing in our bylaw, and when we submitted it, they kicked it back and said, hey, you need this. So, of course, you need your repeal and replace. And that will go in, that'll be advertised, and it'll be appearing for your first reading at the next council meeting.
Great.
Then we can do the process again.
Okay, thank you. So any questions for Troy on that? Okay, so hearing none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and that's correspondence. There was nothing under action required. For information purposes, we did receive a letter from the diocesan, I'm always struggling with that.
Diocese?
But it's diocesan? Anyway, someone will correct me, I'm sure, in the days to come, on the Environment Committee regarding EV charging stations. And it looks like the Anglican Diocese of Halifax and PEI is interested in offering church parking lots in suitable locations to municipalities for the establishment of EV charging stations, which I think is a really innovative idea. Yeah, so any questions on that item? Deputy Warden? Yeah.
When I looked through their website, I didn't see any listed for here. Do they? So-
Well, no, because there was the one here, but it's no longer,
Yeah.
it's not, it's classified as a church anymore, right? So I don't think it's on their list. I looked at the map too, there was nothing
Yeah,
in Richmond
that was
County.
it, like, it sounds like a great idea. I just
Yeah.
didn't know
Oh, it
if
is.
there's anything we
I
can do
don't
with
think it
that
applies
because-
to us,
Yeah.
but it's really innovative thinking, you know?
Yeah.
That's
so-
why it went into info only,
Oh.
Yeah.
there's no action for us.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Okay. Okay, and if there's no other questions on that item? Okay, so the next item is the review of the action items. Are there any questions regarding the action items? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move us on. There were no items added, so we'll open for our final question period for the evening. This would be restricted to the remainder of the agenda following the Committee of the Whole and Bylaw Policy Committee reports. And the number to call is 902-226-9885. It's 902-226-9885, and we'll just leave that open for a minute. And thank you again, Shelley. All right.
That was great.
Yeah, great discussion.
And if they give us the street, then you can just do a blow up of that area.
So you mentioned last meeting
All
about
right.
how long the delay was.
Oh, yes.
So it takes a delay.
Okay, so I'm not hearing any phones ringing. I'm not seeing any members of the gallery looking for questions this evening. So we will move to in camera. If I could get a motion from council, please.
I'll make that motion to move.
Thank you, Councillor Mike Digdon. Could I have a seconder, please?
Second that.
Deputy Warden has seconded the motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
I,
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. So we'll move in camera. We'll just take a short break